Last year at MABE's annual dual language conference, we recognized the giants who opened the doors for bilingual education in Massachusetts, and we honored the individuals behind these early movements. This year, we're being hosted by the Dwight Belizzi Dual Language Academy here in Hartford, Connecticut. And so we want to celebrate the giants that shaped bilingual and dual language education in Connecticut. Join us as we investigate the history of bilingual education in Connecticut and look towards the future because juntos podemos. The history of bilingual and dual language education always starts with advocacy, which in turn drives legislative change and action. In 1968, the passage of the Federal Bilingual Education Act, also known as Title VII, recognized that English learners should have access to bilingual programs for equal educational opportunity. With time and hard work, federally funded grants began to impact bilingual education and truly put it on the map.
Bilingual education started in districts in Hartford, Bridgeport, and in New Britain. And then through these grants, it expanded. We started working on this in 1975. Main goal is to provide bilingual education to all students in Connecticut. My colleague, Tomas Miranda, who was the point person, he was the person that really drove this whole initiative. And there was a legislator involved, Maria Sanchez. We would meet and discuss what we wanted to do, and right, she would help us. And one of the things we wanted to make sure happened was that if we had 20 or more students in a school, that they must have bilingual education. That was the main focus of the law.
Maria Clemencia Colón Sánchez, the first Hispanic woman elected to the Connecticut General Assembly, was known as La Madrina of Hartford Hispanic communities. She tirelessly advocated for bilingual education in public schools and fought for educational reform, including Title VII. Though she was met with resistance from the non-Hispanic community, in 1972, she helped open La Escuelita, the first bilingual school in the state of Connecticut.
Then in 1977, after many meetings, after many discussions, it was brought up to the Connecticut legislature and it was approved. And Connecticut was one of the states with a bilingual education program. They had a director of bilingual at the state level, and that happened to be Tomas Miranda. He then started going around and visiting schools, checking and seeing how things were going, how they could help. And that really had an impact on the quality of language that students were receiving. Now they were being educated in their native language, in the language they understood. And then English was also taught to them, but it was focusing the academics in their native language.
Before Title VII, the bilingual programs were, I would say, they were not standardized. They've always been they continue to be heavily dominated by politics and policy. But before Title VII and dual language, children who were bilingual were seen as coming to school with a deficit. And dual language and Title VII, which supported dual language, completely flipped that script and said, no, children coming to school with other linguistic backgrounds have their own set of skills and benefits and things to offer to the school system and the community. It went from being a deficit to an asset-based approach to education. It was a huge change in how systems looked at it, and systems were more willing to look at bilingual education when money was supplied to support it, because before that, they just saw it as a burden. And when the funding came in to support those classrooms and those teachers' educations, then it wasn't seen as a drain on the system. And so the grants funded people's travel to those sites for those large conferences. And then they had very intensive workshops for people who were involved with the grant writers, sometimes the teachers, the researchers, the evaluators. And so it provided a very comprehensive framework to support dual language development. What the districts were getting funding for was consistent with what the graduate students were getting training in. It was a pretty dynamic and pretty powerful project that led to some very good research data that they could support the development over time of dual language across the country.
The law was well established for its time, and it did help many, many students here in Connecticut. The law was well supported by many leaders in the districts. For example, in the 80s, when we had the English-only movement, Connecticut was one of those few states that kept the bilingual law. And that was through an organization called CABE, the Connecticut Association of Bilingual Bicultural Education, that was also headed by Tomas Miranda. That really helped maintain the quality and the continuation of our bilingual programs here in Connecticut.
Although legislation encouraging bilingual education has been passed at both the federal and state level, change on the ground at the schools and communities can be slower to follow, and challenges remain. Change for Equity was mobilized by passionate teachers and families. This is why in Hartford Public Schools, we are proud and honored to partner with advocates for bilingual education and social justice warriors who have paved the way for research-based, culturally affirming, and equitable programs such as dual language. We are grateful for the opportunity to host this year's MABE 2023 Dual Language Conference. Like in the past, today's educators depend on professional development opportunities and interstate school visits like those offered by MABE to grow.
At that time of life in the 60s, there were still segregated schools. What we were dealing with was not the children that needed a lot of help. We were dealing with children that had no English at all. And the only goal of education in those years was to teach English. The key was to get them the right kind of help. I had a board member tell me that I should stop using the term ESL because English should never be the second language. It was the attitude that English was all and nothing else mattered. And it didn't matter whether the English was effective in teaching them curriculum. It was only that they were speaking and hearing English, that someone could control them through the use of English. The Civil Rights Act and the later Bilingual Education Act addressed this problem, that children should be taught at a level where they can understand in whatever language it took to do that. The teachers themselves were the ones that provided the change. They saw the fact that it was not right, and they were the ones that added the curriculum based on what they had been teaching. When Title VII came, and there was federal backing, and it became a civil rights issue, that's when change began. So that at the point Title VII was funded, there were 30 functioning dual language programs in the United States. So this was not something coming out of the federal government, it was coming from the people. The difference it made was incredible. For one thing, boards of education in little rural towns noted that the federal government considered this something worthy of funding and of programs, of research, that this was an issue that was going to affect the country entirely, that made the bilingual program stand out in the minds of the Board of Education. And without their real desire to see change, this would not have happened. So Title VII, when it came, we were ready to take advantage of it. And the advantages that funding gave many districts were incredible. It wasn't easy. And I think the role of the community can't be thought of in any way but necessary.
Early on, the families worked really hard to work together to make it a positive experience for all the kids, for everybody to feel comfortable, because families really wanted to have their kids have this opportunity. The Spanish-speaking families always wanted their kids to learn English because it was just necessary, and they wanted them to have good connections with English-speaking families. The English-speaking families saw it as a real opportunity for community development and also for the benefit of learning a second language. And then, of course, the frustration was there were always more kids and families who wanted to be in the program than we had slots for.
92 started the school year with an intense preparation, intense meetings with parents who would participate, both English-speaking and Spanish-speaking, and a lot of professional development with the teachers. Tried very hard to show that there were new ways of thinking of things, that the old ways maybe were ready for change. And what wonderful teachers we had in that program. Some of them are still at Wyndham. Through Title VII, getting more and more teachers out to visit other districts was key. We visited the program in Cambridge, Mass., the Amigos program. The Amigos teachers came down and demonstrated their strategies and skills to our teachers. It was an all-out project. I'm still surprised. I don't know how we did it, but it had to be the parents who put the pressure on to try something new. The parents who recognized this was not equitable, and the parents that truly wanted to see all kids treated equally.
As can also be seen in Jean Romano's book, Transitions in Connecticut, the parallels between the past and the present can help guide our future. Threats to bilingual education shape a community of practice and collaboration at multiple levels, and legislation that funds bilingual education helps foster new generations of educators.
Title VII was a federal program that created a funding framework for grants at the local school level, but also at the higher ed level. And so for me personally, Title VII intersected in a number of ways. It created an opportunity for Wyndham Public Schools to have the first dual language program in Connecticut and provided funding for that program. And then under a completely different title grant, the University of Connecticut had scholarships for people to pursue their PhDs. And so that's how I was able to get my terminal degree. So it completely changed the trajectory of my career. When somebody got a grant, they were required to attend some of these meetings. Those were opportunities for people to network nationwide, and their ability to disseminate research and put us in touch with top researchers was critical. And that lent a lot of credibility to what we said when we came back to the district.
At the university level, provided us with support financially to receive our degrees. For example, my PhD was supported through a Title VII grant. Many of the students wouldn't have teachers that looked like them if it wasn't through Title VII. Leaders in districts saw the need for bilingual education and how important it was in many districts.
There's always been this, and continues to be, a real problem with getting people certified to teach bilingual in Connecticut. It's not a straightforward shot, and it's one that asks more of bilingual teachers than really any other group. Bottom line issue that there's not enough of a pipeline of teachers coming in who are qualified to teach bilingual. Arctel coordinated a group of bilingual directors, but over the course of a couple of years, a few hours a month, and we hammered out an application for an alternate route to certification, which is what Arctel is.
Our state's populations of multilingual learners and identified English learners continue to grow. And we know that that's consistent with what we see at the national level as well. There's been a variety of factors that have led to a long-standing and significant shortage of bilingual certified educators. The state has really grown in its commitment to building and diversifying its teacher and education leader workforce. In the case of bilingual education specifically, legislation was passed in 2021 that alleviated some of the unnecessary barriers that kept individuals from becoming bilingual teachers.
Just as there are barriers to bilingual educators, there are barriers that bilingual students face. Hartford Public Schools is committed to empowering students and honoring the language and culture that they speak, both at home and in school through dual language programming and the Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy. This not only supports our goal of maintaining student identities and valuing the assets and talents each student brings, but also provides them with the skills necessary in 2 languages to be successful in the workforce and as a member of a global society.
I am really proud of our district because any emergent bilingual or multilingual learner who is eligible for a dual language program is now able to participate in a dual language program. So all of our Spanish speaking multilingual learners who want to be in a dual language program can be in one. I would love for that to happen in all the districts in Connecticut. There are a lot of challenges in sustaining dual language programs. Anytime we're trying to change the narrative and elevating the status of bilingualism and Spanish speakers, that we're going to find that there are the implicit biases that we bump up against. Going into dual language, you need to remember that that is part of the package. That's you're accepting that there will be barriers, that there will be challenges, and you're accepting that you're ready to face that. Through advocacy, the legislators learn about our needs as dual language practitioners.
It's my hope that we can continue to work together as a field to continue to be supportive of you, of efforts to increase and cultivate and grow multilingualism, and to build better pathways and better routes for individuals that are interested in pursuing bilingual education as a career. Multilingualism is really such a gift. And I think it's really incumbent upon us as a field to grow our bilingual teacher workforce and to grow that multilingualism among our students.
Stay in touch with why you're doing this. Hold true to your why, that you are impacting social justice by being in dual language education. It makes the barriers easier to overcome.
We must continue to bring together our families, community, educators, and other stakeholders to understand the importance of bilingual education. There is power in unity. After all, it is a collective journey of advocacy. Si se puede, y juntos podemos.
Always do the best you can and stand up for the students. Sometimes it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but always stand up for those students.
Hello, mi nombre es Miguel Cardona y soy tu secretario de educación. Throughout my career, I've lived the benefits of being a multilingual parent, teacher, administrator, and secretary of education. But sadly, it didn't start out that way. When I entered the school doors for the first time, speaking Spanish and not so good English, everything felt new and overwhelming. I doubted myself. I was scared. I was scared to lose my identity in a school that I didn't understand too well, or be in a school that didn't understand me. I ended that day in the school nurse's office crying, and my mom had to come pick me up. It was a tough day. But to this day, I celebrate that 5-year-old and that experience. I'm proud of him for letting his parents talk him into returning to school the next day. You can't be a dropout at 4 years old. In much the same way, I'm proud of all of our multilingual students. I see myself in them. I want them all to know something it took me a very long time to learn. Something that I'm very proud to say in my visits across the country. Bilingualism and biculturalism are superpowers. They're superpowers. They're assets to embrace, not deficits to erase. And let me tell you, I wish I had known when I was a child what you just saw in that video about the history of bilingual education in Connecticut. I wish I'd known about the efforts to support students like me. Efforts of giants and mentors like Dr. Gladys Labas to update the education law in Connecticut, as featured in the video. One of the first things I did when I became Commissioner of Education in Connecticut is ask Dr. Labas to join me in Connecticut and be a part of the team. I wish I'd known that there was a whole world of bilingual and multilingual educators out there. Educators like you. Some of the best teachers I've ever worked with in my career in Meriden, and especially Hanover Elementary School, were those bilingual education teachers and those English learner teachers. That's why we have to make sure we're recruiting and retaining more high-quality bilingual and multilingual educators. That's why we need to make sure that we're paying our teachers a competitive wage and offering them the benefits to honor the profession. That's why we have to fund and support the programs that we know work, like high-quality dual immersion programs. Look, this morning I visited Tyler Elementary School in Washington, D.C. It was a great visit. The school is a dual language school. And I visited a classroom of 5-year-old kindergartners who are learning Spanish and English. It was amazing. There were maybe, out of 25 students, there were maybe like 5 or 6 students that were Latino. The rest were either black or white students. And the Spanish that was coming out of their mouths was amazing. I read an amazing book to them. It's called De Aquí Como el Coquí by Nomar Perez. Amazing book about this character named Miguel who left Puerto Rico and went to New York and had to experience that many of you in the room and my parents had when they went from Puerto Rico to Connecticut. Having to find yourself in a new land. You know, we know the research shows that strong programs like dual language programs have strong outcomes for ELs and native English speakers. Data shows that if you're learning a new language or a second language, your ability to learn concepts is better. Your reading levels are better. That's why we need to lift up our bilingual and multilingual learners and the credentials they earn. I know many of you in the room are working to make sure the seal of biliteracy is something that your students get. I credit you for that. I want to see that across the country. We also need to make sure that our students and their families know they have critical protections under civil rights laws. Our students should be afforded the same opportunities as any other student in their schools. We have to raise the bar for bilingual and multilingual education in this country. Ya es tiempo to raise the bar across the country. It's good for our students. It's good for our economy, and it's good for our nation. Can we do it? To echo the theme of this conference, juntos podemos. Together we can. Look, I'm asking you to join me as we promote multilingualism in this country by lifting up best practices, but by saying con orgullo that being bilingual and being bicultural is a superpower. It's a strength. It's an asset. Gone are going to be those days where we bring students into programs that erase their native language, erase their native culture. In this era where we see some states passing laws to minimize diversity, we're going to celebrate it. This is an opportunity that we have together. Let's make sure we seize this moment together, juntos, pa'lante siempre. Thank you.